abundant, more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
And welcome to Living Your Inspired Life. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA, and we are always having an amazing, inspiring, and fun conversation on Living Your Inspired Life. So I invite you to go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and check out all the great conversations and the good work we've been doing. And with that said, I want to welcome onto our show an author, inspirational teacher, spiritual teacher, who's written a book. He handed it to me in person, and I love the title, so I had to have him on. The book is called End Your Story, Begin Your Life. Hello, don't we all need that? So I want to welcome Jim Dreaver. Jim, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Susan.
So, and literally, when you gave me this book, I was like, I took it home, I put it on my counter, and I kept walking by, looking, End Your Story, really? Because I got a story going on in my head, and you gave it to me, of course, at exactly the right time. And so I sat down with myself. All right, Susan, what's your story? And you really want to end it because what I want is my life. I want to live my life. So share with our listeners a little bit of your background.
Well, I from New Zealand originally.
Yes, we can hear that.
Yeah,
and I love that.
And I've been living in California for 40 years, though. So I came here to study chiropractic. Long story short, I came here to study chiropractic. I was married to a New Zealand woman, and we figured we'd graduate. Went to Palmer College of Chiropractic in Davenport, Iowa. This was in the mid-'70s, and we'd graduate and we'd go back to New Zealand. But my last year in chiropractic college, I suffered this health crisis, and which put me on such fear of dying, like waking up dead. That was my fear.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get through the night. And so that started my spiritual quest. I began to meditate, slow down. I began reading the books of J. Krishnamurti, and that began a whole process. And so we ended up staying here, coming to California, built a practice in Northern California, Sonoma County, Santa Rosa, then moved to Sebastopol, and now I've moved to Southern California 5 years ago.
So you've studied Krishnamurti and you've studied some Zen stuff, but the person that affected you the most, his name is Jean Klein?
Exactly, Jean Klein. He was the guy who kind of nurtured my awakening. He was my guide. See, awakening is seeing that nothing between your ears is actually real.
Okay. Now, I imagine there's some people out there going, okay, what does that mean?
Right. So,
and I totally get what you mean by it, but let's go, yeah.
Yeah, so we can launch into the teaching now.
Yes.
So this is the title of my book, End Your Story. We have a story. We're a storytelling people. That's what makes us unique as human beings. We're a storytelling people. But the great freedom or liberation is realize we're not our stories, which, like the emotional reactions they cause, come and go, but the ever-present consciousness or awareness, which is always here. We are what is always here now. Mm-hmm. We are present here now as pure consciousness, pure awareness. You are that, I am that, everybody is that.
So, Jim, how do people okay, here's my question. How do people living an everyday life really open up and awaken? Because it sounds like you intentionally said, all right, I'm going to slow down, I'm going to meditate, how do people have a life and become awake in what you've discovered?
Right. Well, it's there has to be a degree of intention. You have to want to wake up. You have to want to get free. And usually most people, it's suffering that causes them to travel the path of awakening. they have to have some deep suffering in your life. A relationship breaking up, a parent dying, a financial crisis, a health crisis. That is what wakes a lot of people up. I remember listening to an interview with Steve Ross, who was the late Steve Ross. He was the former CEO of Time Warner.
Yes.
And this was an interview done on public radio many, many years ago. And it was the end of his life. He'd been diagnosed with terminal prostate cancer. And he realized he'd never given a moment to self-reflection. It had been all about making money and succeeding. And he said himself, I succeeded at the highest level, obviously. But my relationships were harmed because of my lack of attention. My family life suffered because I just wanted to make it. And now I've made it, and now I've got terminal cancer. And I would hope that at this last stage of my life, I can find myself, my true self, whatever that is. He wanted to give his life to self-reflection now. He just hoped it wasn't too late. So this is a case of a man who got the wake-up call at the end of his life, and maybe it was too late. I like to think it wasn't. I like to think he found the sweetness and joy and compassion in his heart.
Right.
But who knows? Well,
so when you say the wake-up call, there's a lot of us that get wake-up calls, but we don't pay attention. I mean, the bell is dinging a lot, for years and years, and we're going, yeah, whatever that is, I don't know. I mean, people don't even hear it.
Right.
And you're right, until it's almost so in my life, I've trained myself to begin to listen to those those little bells that go off, so that I can catch myself before I have to go into any kind of drama.
Yes.
But I'm literally coming out of one event. I'm going through divorce, so talk about a wake-up call, man. And I did not realize. Then I can track back and go, wow, there was a little dingy ding ding down that line, and there was another one, and I didn't pay attention to those things. And I'm sure, and I know that this happens with people that are in jobs where, I have a client who is being let go of her job that she's been in for 25 years. And she was seeing it coming, and she's been approaching it from a more aware and awake place, so that when the final bye-bye occurred, she wasn't traumatized by it. But there's lots of people that all of a sudden, wait a minute, I just gave you all my life's blood, and now you're telling me?
Right. Well, there's a great piece of Cherokee wisdom. If you can hear the whispers, you don't have to listen to the screams.
Ooh.
If you can hear the whispers, you don't have to listen to the screams.
I got chills. Yeah.
Right. So being on the path of awakening is really about being tuned into the whispers and recognizing the whispers as they arise, and you can take action then.
So in ending your story, you're saying become awake. But how do we understand that we really are running a story? Because I did it driving down here. I was not looking at the territory. I was not looking at the trees. It's a beautiful day. And I got to my destination and went, whoa, I wasn't even in the car. I was in my head with the current story.
Right. And what is the current story again?
Well, today it was about, I don't know, it was about my son.
Right.
When am I going to see him? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. So you have to be really interested in awakening, waking up, and becoming free of your story, and really becoming aware of what you really are, and what are you? I mean, who and what are you? You've got to ask yourself that question deeply. You've got to realize, my God, I'm not my thoughts. I have thoughts. I have an ego, but I'm not my ego. I have an I thought. I have a me thought, but I'm not my I thought, my me thought, because they come and go. They shift and they change. We are always this awareness, this presence, this consciousness, which is always here. That's what has to be seen again and again and again, until finally you realize, wow, I am that.
That takes a lot of awareness.
Right, exactly.
And intentionality. It takes paying attention.
Yeah,
it's so
right,
easy.
Exactly, you do.
It's so easy to fall asleep in this culture. now with all the different gadgets and technology and all of that. It's just, how do you do it, Jim?
Well, as I said, you have to want to wake up. There's a great Zen story about a young student who said to a master, "Master, I want to be enlightened more than anything. What should I do?" And the master said, "Come down here to the river with me." He went down the river, and then suddenly the master grabbed the student's head and pushed him underwater.
Oh, gosh.
And the student was underwater thinking to himself, okay, this is a teaching of some kind, I'll get it. But then he started running out of air, and he began to fight and struggle, but the master wasn't letting him up. And finally, the master pulled him out, and he was gasping for air. "Oh, my God. Master, why did you do that?" And the master said, "When you want enlightenment as badly as you wanted air then you'll have it."
Ah, yeah.
Now, it's a good story, but it's only a story. And realizing that it's only a story, it requires that urgency for people. But people wake up to the truth of their being without necessarily, in the most strange of ways. I mean, it's nothing, there's no format for waking. But ultimately, when you come to awaken, you realize that you're not your story. You have a story, but you're not your story.
Right.
You're not any story. You're not any story. You're not even a spiritual story.
I like that. I like that. You know, it's been interesting because I've been contemplating, since, knowing I was going to have you on the show, I've been contemplating this idea of where does my story begin and end? And I began to watch my thoughts about my story, or whatever it was. And I began to see that there was a little bit of a gap between my story and me.
Right.
And me wasn't necessarily me. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. It makes sense to me.
But that's when I went, oh, that's the place I want to live, in the gap. I want to live
the gap.
In between the story that I wake up with and go to bed at night with, or run in my car or whatever.
Right.
I want to live in the space in between that, so that I can really begin to discern that this is encapsulated, and I can now put it on the shelf.
Right.
Or throw it away.
Good. So hold on to that story. The story that I want to live in the gap.
Okay.
That's a good story to hold on to.
Okay.
It's not the truth, but it's a story.
It's a start.
It's a story which will lead you to the realization of your true nature. Because the more, so you're getting caught up in your story about your ex-husband, or your soon-to-be ex-husband, or your son, or whatever, and you suddenly realize, wow, I'm getting lost in a story. Then you come back to the being, just being here now, being with the traffic, with the roadside, the nature, the trees, just being here now. And suddenly you find yourself relaxing.
Oh, yeah.
And you're in the gap now. You're one with the experience of the gap. And you realize, wow, this is what I really am, this pure awareness, pure consciousness. And eventually, you'll abide there all the time. Eventually, you'll realize you are that gap. You are the gap. Mm-hmm. Your true nature is pure consciousness, pure awareness, manifesting in this beautiful body-mind form that is you.
I want to read a quote from your book, Jim,
yes.
if I may.
Yes.
Because in it, you talk a lot about freedom. And so... you said, freedom comes as you see the story for what it is, a figment of your own creation. When you're not holding on to any idea or image of yourself, there's no buildup of emotional energy. I want to talk about that,
yes.
But let me finish this quote. You are simply open to life in the present. The secret is in emphasizing awareness itself, having all your senses alert and not getting lost in thinking. Then your head will be clear and you will feel the deeper energy, the deeper beauty and power of creation itself, and it will nourish you. Then your emotions will come into balance. They will arise spontaneously and authentically. Now, okay. That sounds really easy and good when it's written down in a book, but the practice of this and the dealing with the emotional energy buildup, I think that's important for us. Let's talk about that, because I know so many people that we were kind of talking about it a little bit before we came on air, so many people that are emotionally constipated in a way. They're stuck in their emotions. Right. And they think that that's the real thing, the worry, the fear, the anger, the shame. So what you're saying is to be present with that emotional buildup?
Yes. So this is the basis of the freedom practice.
Okay.
The freedom practice is at the heart of my work. And so I'm going to talk about the freedom practice. Now, I promise you, if you do this freedom practice, every time you're suffering, every time you're feeling self-doubt, every time someone pushes your buttons, every time your energy's a little bit off, you do the freedom practice.
Okay.
And the 3 basic steps. The first step is to be present with your suffering.
Ay, yeah.
Ouch. Most people want to resist, reject, or deny their suffering, right? Or rationalize it. But you've got to learn to face it. You've got to learn to be present with it.
So that sounds to me like I got to be really brave.
Yes, you got to be courage. You've got to exercise courage. Enlightenment is not for the faint-hearted.
Oh my gosh, I know.
It's the supreme courage because you're facing your deepest and darkest self. You've got to face your demons. It's an old Irish saying. If you run away from a ghost, it'll chase you and haunt you for the rest of your life. But if you stop and turn and face it, it'll disappear because ghosts aren't real.
Yeah.
And these ghosts we run away from is our anger, our loneliness, our sense of abandonment, our shame, our guilt, our fear, anxiety. And we've got to turn and face this. And eventually you learn to welcome it because this is the essential step.
Okay, that sounds kind of masochistic, Jim.
Yes, I know.
Welcoming your fear. Okay.
Right, because that's what I did the last year before I woke up. I woke up in 1995. Finally, I saw that I wasn't any story and I was free. And I've been free of suffering ever since. But remind me to talk about residues because I'm still a human being. We're still human beings and we still have an ego. Even though enlightenment is seeing that you're not your ego, you still have an ego. So
yes, and I like that about your book too. That you're not one of those guys that says get rid of your ego. It's that I don't think you can extricate your ego. I don't think you really want to.
No, well, you can't because the ego is that kind of personal boundary setter. Every time you say I or me, it's your ego speaking. But is it your conscious ego, your awakened ego, or is it the unawakened reactive ego? That's the important question. So anyway, for the last year before I woke up, John Klein, my teacher, always talked about the importance of welcoming your experience, being open to your experience and not resisting it. And so I had a mantra, and this is my mantra. I welcome this suffering. It's showing me I'm not yet free.
Okay. Say it again. I welcome the suffering.
Because it's showing me where I'm not yet free.
Where I'm not yet free.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I said. I wasn't just present with it. I welcomed it because it's showing me where I was not yet free. In fact, I learned to say, bring it on. I want to see where I suffer. Because enlightenment is freedom from suffering.
Okay. I really think that's insane. That's insane. And I get it. I'm walking it. But that's a hard thing. Bring it on.
Yes. Well,
bring it on. Especially when you're suffering.
That's for advanced students. You got to be. But anyway, so so be present with it. If you can't welcome it, just be present with it. You've got to face it.
Right.
And then the second step is notice the story you're telling yourself.
Because of it.
Because there's always a story behind suffering. See, suffering, we've got to differentiate between pain and suffering.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, let's do that.
Pain is a fact of life, a part of the human experience. Emotional pain from the loss of someone you deeply love, everyone's going to feel that pain. Just the more awake and free you are, the more you feel it. You may feel deep grief. Like when my mother died in New Zealand 12 years ago, I was already awake, but I found myself often crying, thinking my dear poor mother's left me. But it was a good grief. It was good tears, emotional honesty. Or we can feel the physical pain of an injury, illness. Right, we all know that. But suffering is the pain of the ego. Suffering always has an ego. I don't like this being alone. I don't like not having enough money to pay the rent. I don't like not having someone to love me. I don't like getting sick. I don't like the fact that I'm going to die in a year. And somebody I know has been given years to live because he's got cancer. So you notice the story behind the suffering, because there's always a story. It may be an unconscious story.
Right.
Maybe you have to dig deep for the story. Sometimes it's obvious, like I'm depressed. I can't handle this. This shouldn't be happening. These are all the stories we tell ourselves. These are the stories behind our suffering. And then step 3, you see the truth. And the truth is this, it's simple truth. The story comes and goes, just like the suffering comes and goes. But you as this clear being you are always here. You are always here now. You exist here now. So breathe and relax and feel your existence here now. Just that takes you out of your head. It takes you into your heart. Your heart opens more. Mm-hmm. You've come back to here now, this moment here now. And this moment here now feels pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
No story, right?
Right.
No story, no suffering.
Well, it's interesting when, like we're having a conversation right now. What I notice sometimes is when people are having a conversation, you can feel really connected to them because both of you in that conversation are here now. And then there's other times where you can see that they just kind of mentally go away. So it sounds to me like to begin to practice the here now, we can start right where we are in how we're dialoguing with our people we're in relationship with.
Right.
Being here now.
Exactly. And when I'm in a relationship with somebody and they're not here now, I gently point them out to them. Hey, you went off somewhere there. Where were you? And I do that with my clients a lot. Because people go off, until they're awake and free, they tend to go off in their mind, their story.
Right. Which becomes more of the, it's like watching the movie screen. It's interesting because with all the devices that we have now, right? And I have a young adult, and it took him a while to get that he did not need to be on the computer and the phone with the earbuds in, listening to the music all the time with the television on. Uh-huh. And he finally said to me a few weeks ago, he's like, he started picking up the phone when I call, and I'm like, wow, how come you're not like texting? Or he goes, no, I just decided that I'd rather talk to somebody than text and get confused or deal with the email. I was like, wow, that's like...
Maybe it's a general sign. Maybe people are even young people are waking up to...
I hope so, man. Because it's interesting. You can't go anywhere without seeing people on their phone.
Right, exactly.
Going to the store.
And the phone is the main way people access everything now. Yep. Right.
And it's the way that they feel connected, and yet you're not.
Yes.
You're not. You're not having a one-on-one with eye contact and really listening. You're dealing with the phone.
Right. Virtual reality.
Yeah. I was out to dinner with a friend, and we were talking, and the table next to us, there were these two guys. I think clearly they were on a date, and yet both of them were on their phones. Uh-huh. Until the food got delivered. So that was a good 20 minutes. They weren't exchanging any kind of conversation. Uh-huh. And I was watching that going, and then when the food came, the phone was right by the plate, so they could kind of check the phone, and both of them were doing it. I thought, wow, I don't know how you build a relationship on that.
Yes, yeah.
Just having it right by my side. So I want to read another quote from your book. You say that, because I want to talk about the non-attachment piece of finding this freedom.
Yes.
And you say non-attachment is the result of clearly seeing the true nature of reality. It frees us from worry and suffering. And so it goes back to what you were saying about being present to your suffering.
Yes.
But I got to tell you, Jim, in my experience, getting detached from my suffering or my story does not at times feel humanly possible.
Right. Well, listen, let me speak about that for a moment. So Jean Klein was a teacher at Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual approach to waking up. Now, most people who wake up in the West wake up through the non-dual approach.
Mm-hmm.
And non-duality is simply seeing that reality is right here, right now. It's always only ever right here, right now. There's no difference between the spiritual and the material. A lot of people differentiate between the spiritual values and material values. The non-dual world sees not that at all. There's no difference. So, and where the avidya, the ignorance, in the Sanskrit word avidya means ignorance. It's ignorance of your true nature. Where it starts is in our ideas about who we think we are. So the non-dual approach teaches, as you see more and more clearly that you are not your story, you're not any story, you're not even the I thought, the me thought. The I thought, the me thought comes and goes too. We have an I thought, we have a me thought, we have an ego. But we're not any of them because they come and they go. And we're not anything that comes and goes. We are what is always, always here now. So we breathe and relax into being here now.
So give me me an example of the I thought or the me thought.
Well, we believe, like, gosh, how am I going to pay the rent at the end of the month? It's a common I thought that I's have, right?
Right.
Most people have. And because the I thought believes in this, they believe in the person they think they are. The I thought. We haven't seen when you have a thought like, how am I going to pay the rent next month? Who is this I who's going to pay? Who's worrying about paying the rent? Can you find it for me?
Me. It's me.
Okay, and who are you?
But I'm the person that's got to pay the rent. I have clients like that. They go, but I don't understand what you're saying, and they'll go back and forth. But what's this? The reality is, my rent has to get paid.
Right.
That's the reality for
all
of us, really. But the reality is, it has to get paid.
Right, but it doesn't have to get paid until
yes,
a certain time, right? Maybe a week from now, a day from now.
Right.
And so the more awake and free you are, the more you live in the present moment. Always. You honor the past. You keep an eye on the future, including the rent payment becoming due. And but you always live here, rooted here now in the present moment.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So that we don't worry or stress or get fearful about what's going to be happening in the future.
Because we've already woken up to the fact that we're not this I, this me that we think we are. We have an I thought, we have a me thought, and that's we have an ego, and that's our personal boundary setter. And we need to set boundaries. We need, I've got differentiate between my car and your car, for example. And but the more awake and free we are, the more we live here now in the present. We don't get lost in any story. Stories create the emotional reactions. A story about guilt creates the feeling of guilt.
Right.
And a story about anger creates the feeling of anger. Of shame creates the feeling of shame. When you free yourself from the story, this is the whole thing about the non-dual approach that my book is based on, End Your Story, Begin Your Life. When you see that you're not the thought or story, the thinking drops away. About 80% of the content of your mind drops away. Because 80% of the content of people's minds are caught up in the me, myself, and I, me, myself, my story, me, myself, my problems. Right. When you see that you're not that story, you're never any story, because the story comes and goes. The stories change over the years depending on your circumstances. It's a great relief. It's a great unburdening. And then your mind becomes very clear and very quiet. But it becomes very empty. You're just present as this powerful, creative, loving, beautiful being you are. And everybody is that. Everybody's a powerful, loving, creative being. The more you wake up to your true nature, the more you realize that.
Right.
And then you can use thought and story and intention as a functional tool, a creative tool.
Okay, so Jim, I want to take a short break, and then we'll be back talking more about ending your story and beginning your life, because I want to go into some more of that. So I'm talking to Jim Dreaver. You're listening to Living Your Inspired Life, and we will be right back. Hi, this is Susan Burrell from Living Your Inspired Life. I always find it easier and more fun to expand my life by being connected to open-hearted, like-minded people committed to being on the same path I am. If you feel the same way, I suggest you visit a Center for Spiritual Living. There are wonderful communities in Ventura, Ojai, Santa Barbara, Oxnard, Pleasant Valley, Camarillo, and Westlake Village. You'll find terrific people, great information, and more tools to help you live the life you were born to live. So go to csl.org to find a center near you. That's csl.org for a center near you. Welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. And if you've missed anything, go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and check out what we've done. Tune in, tune up, develop your power perspective. And I also invite you to go to the donations page because we want to stay on the air doing positive talk radio, and we do need some financial support. So check it out. If you want to give a one-time donation, an ongoing monthly gift, we would graciously and excitedly accept it and say yes. So that's livingyourinspiredlife.org. So I'm talking to author and spiritual teacher Jim Dreaver about his book called End Your Story and Begin Your Life. So Jim, right before break, we were talking about the dynamic of people that have this I story going on of I have to pay my rent.
Yes.
And that the suffering comes from the worry about how am I going to pay the rent.
Right, exactly.
Or the story around I don't have enough to pay my rent.
Right.
So I want like a definite kernel for people, because I think there's a lot of us out there that have that going on a monthly basis or a weekly basis even. How, besides being present with it, and then breathing into the present moment, how else can we begin to change our story or even notice it? When you're not in that practice, man, I got to tell you, it's impossible.
Right, right. So I cannot overemphasize enough that the importance of the freedom practice. Whenever you're suffering, whenever you're in conflict, whenever you're upset, doing the practice, I'm upset and I'm really caught up in a story. Okay, I'll breathe, be present with it. Notice the story I'm telling myself. I'm telling myself that story again. You can say to yourself, I'm telling myself that story again. Mm-hmm. And then notice how the truth, how the story comes and goes, just like the suffering comes and goes. Mm-hmm. But you are this beautiful person who's always here. So breathe and relax and be what you are, this person who exists here now. Now, there's something else that can help. Exploring your early childhood traumas. Because this all we started this, developing our story about age 2. Uh-huh. We began believing in that we were this I, this me that we think we are. And this, the psychologists call it the terrible twos. And anyone who's been a parent understands that. And so exploring our past traumas, maybe with some guidance with a counselor or a guide, a coach. And this is the kind of work I do in my private sessions. Probably you do it in your private sessions mm-hmm. too. And I take people back to their early childhood and see where their fears arose from, where the story first started. Right. I'm not safe in the world. I don't feel safe. I was abused as a child. I was abandoned as a child. That stuff, those traumas run us for the rest of our lives until we wake up and see them. But once we see them, we're free of them. I have a saying, seeing is freeing. Once you see the truth about something, you've seen it.
Yeah.
And so this is the practice, the freedom practice, and the practice of going into your past with some guidance, and just being supremely present, just coming back to presence. Every time you feel caught up in a story, you notice yourself caught up in a story, coming back, I'm caught up in a story then, like your experience of driving along the freeway here, and you realize you're caught up in your story.
Yeah.
That realization will bring you back to the present.
Right.
Krishnamurti always said the awareness of inattention brings us back to attention.
Awareness of inner tension.
Inattention.
Oh, inattention.
Like,
yeah.
We're not being aware brings us back to being aware.
So I'm going to read another quote from your
Yes.
book, Jim, and because it talks about this. What becomes clear on this pathway of awakening is the more you hold on to the need to have things be a certain way, the more you insist this isn't right or that should not be allowed, the more emotional charge you are storing up. Now, yes, that is what most people do.
Yes.
Is I know I'm right. I know I'm right. They're wrong, or whatever it is, or I should be able to, or you should do, and that is also our story, right?
Right.
That we want to hang on to.
Yes.
That we think defines us, or them, or everything.
Right.
And again, that is a hard thing to recognize, A, and let go of, B.
Yes. Well, in the recognition is the letting go. The more we see that, my God, I'm caught up in a story, the more we don't even have to let go of it. It falls away because it's not real. What we're imagining we're holding on to is not real.
Okay, but what about those of us, hello, I'm raising my hand, those of us who don't, I can let go of a lot of things, but I am not going to let go of that.
All right.
I am not. And you can't make me. And all the other people that are going to tell me, they can't make me.
Okay, so give me an example. Give me a practical example from your own experience or experience of a client. Somebody.
I deal with a lot of people that are parents, right? And they have expectations of their children.
I had expectations of my son too.
And I have too. And I just was dealing with this one client this week, and his expectation was that his son should get a job.
Right.
And that job should look like a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, or not a random job here and a little part-time gig there with, several days off in between. It should look like that so he can earn a living to pay his rent, his own rent.
Right.
And boy, to get this father to let go of that expectation and see that his son was okay doing it the way he's doing it and he's figuring it out, it was near impossible.
Right. Well, you have to see, a person has to want to let go. They have to want to free themselves. If they're holding on tightly to an expectation, they're going to be disappointed or they're going to be satisfied if that expectation is met. But then when the person decides to quit their job or quit school or whatever, they'll be disappointed. So long as their happiness depends on anything outside ourselves, it's always conditional.
Right.
When things are going our way, we feel great. Making money, got a pretty girlfriend or boyfriend, but then we lose those, we fall apart.
Well, so here's the thing about going back to expectations, because we all as human beings have expectations. My life is going to turn out this way. My kid's life should turn out this way. If they behave this way, and again, I get those are all stories that we've made up that aren't really based in any reality. They're based in our fantasy of what we want to have happen. But I'm trying to swim back to the client who has the expectation that his son should have a steady job. This is a place where a lot of people, because that's been their experience, well, I've had a steady job and that's paid my bills, so therefore everybody should have that job, or you know what I mean?
Sure.
Should have a steady gig. There's also, it's really hard, I think, for people to kind of pull all that apart and see where the kernel of truth is. What is the truth underneath all that?
Right. Well, people have to want to wake up. They have to be interested in awakening and transformation and freedom. If they're not interested in that, you can't work with them. So that's like a person who's a right-wing Christian, for example, or a fundamentalist Jew or a fundamentalist Muslim. They're not going to change their ways.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so you just have to get along as best you can with those people.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you also say then is that there are certain let me see if I can grasp it. I not that I don't agree with you, Jim, but there are certain stagnant belief systems.
Yes, exactly. That's a good way of describing it.
That keep people stuck.
Right.
And I would even go as far as to say is that the story that people run when they're stuck is exactly the thing that they need to face, right? This is what you're saying in your book.
Right.
In order to end your story and begin your life, you've got to face those things instead of saying, well, we all agree. Everybody else agrees, so I must agree with them.
Right.
Or I must be in alignment with whatever they think.
Right.
And that goes back to this client, the father who wants his son to have a regular gig.
Right.
It's how he was brought up. It's the expectation his father had of him. So he feels he's in his perfect right to have the expectation of his son.
Right.
And there's a lot of other things that happen in our world now that have changed so dramatically that the old way of doing things we see doesn't work.
Yes.
And so approaching like this young son from a different POV instead of this is the way it always was, so therefore it always has to be that way for you. And like you're saying, being present with the kid for long enough periods of time to not judge or project what he should do, so the kid can find out. You were sharing this before, so the kid can have space.
Right, a space. So it comes back to something we were talking about at the beginning. It comes back to real human connection. Openness. You have to be open enough to the unknown to really connect with your son or daughter.
Or spouse.
Connect with it. No story, no image, no expectation, no judgment. Pure openness. True openness, just pure being, connecting in a pure being to being level. I had an experience recently with my fiancée, Tanya, who we were arguing over something stupid, and we're sitting down, and then suddenly the fridge turned off and everything became silent.
Ooh.
And this is immense, and we both became aware of the silence simultaneously. We stopped talking and just became one with the vast silence of our true nature. It was tremendously healing, tremendously unifying.
Mm-hmm.
And really, that is what is there to be discovered. That Jean Klein, there's a bench in Henry's Beach in Santa Barbara, now called Arroyo Burro, dedicated to Jean Klein, because he lived the last years of his life in Santa Barbara. And it's about 25 yards south of the restaurant there. And the bench faces the ocean. On the bench, there's a plaque dedicated to him that says, "Everything appears and disappears in silence."
Ooh, I like that.
Jean Klein, sage, author, teacher. Everything appears and disappears in silence. And what we discover as we get free of our story and become more present in this pure beingness that we are, we discover that our true nature is silence. Pure awareness is silence. But it's a silence that's not a separate thing. It's just like the silence of being, the universe, this vast ocean of silence that we are. Everything comes out of that and dissolves back into it. All conversations, all communications, human beings, animals, plants, everything appears and disappears in this vast silence. And so when we're comfortable with silence, that's when we really realize we're becoming free. We're becoming free.
Oh, I like that. And I like your analogy about the ocean, using the ocean as an explanation for consciousess, that everything ebbs and flows all the time.
Exactly.
And there's something very deep in that
Right.
ocean,
Yes.
that ocean of consciousness, if you will.
I write about it in my book, actually. I call it the well of our being. As we dive deeper and deeper into the well of our being, we discover the true source of well-being.
Oh, I like that. Yes, and I actually agree with you. That's been my personal experience.
Yes.
It's so facing the things we're afraid of or ashamed of or angry about. It does bring you into that deep well
of beingness.
And if you can be present with it, you begin to feel better.
Right, and then we become truly a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And as a human being here now, then we look at life, look at our life and responsibilities and obligations, and we decide what we're going to do. So doing flows out of being.
Not the other way around.
Right, exactly. For the unawakened person who is completely caught up in their story, they're always doing in the hopes that they'll have what they want to have, and so they can be happy finally. It's going to be a peace finally. And if they are successful, they have what they have, and they are at peace until things change.
Right. Until
something changes. They get an illness which is devastating, or someone leaves them, their lover leaves them, or they find out that I remember during the crash of 2008, the financial crash, I was speaking with an accountant who worked in the Valley, and she told me a story about the dozens of men in their 60s and 70s who were previously very wealthy, very affluent, who came in crying because they had this huge tax bill on investments that were now worthless. Their life had changed overnight, virtually.
Oh, my goodness.
Their wealth had gone, disappeared. And these men were like, golf club Republicans or maybe Democrats, it doesn't really matter. But their well-being came from what they had. But so in Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, he said that the way to do is to be.
Mm-hmm.
The way to do is to be. And so as we learn to be more established in presence in our true nature, here now, then we look around and we see what we need to do, and then we have the results of our doing, the fruits of our actions. And they're great, success, more health, whatever. But because we're already established in beingness, if our things change in our circumstances, which they can always change, right? Circumstances can always change, and they always do change.
Yeah, that's part of life.
That's part of life.
I think that's the contract that we agreed to before we were born. Yeah, I get it. Everything changes. I'll sign on the dotted line.
No, exactly.
And then we get here going, oh, my goodness, no.
I don't want things to change.
No.
Oh, my God, spare me.
Yeah.
Spare me. But anyway, because we're already established in beingness, we can flow with the changes more easily. The more you know yourself as the changeless, which is what enlightenment is, the easier it is to flow with the changes.
Boy, that's like a lifelong quest, isn't it?
Yes.
To say, okay, I am at one with the changeless.
Yeah, because you are the changeless. It's our true nature. So that's what my work is about. That's what End Your Story, Begin Your Life is all about. It's about realizing yourself as the changeless. And amidst the ever-changing thoughts, feelings, sensations, events, circumstances, people, the comings and goings of everything in your life.
Sounds like the ocean again.
Yes.
It's interesting. I just, as part of this facing your reality thing, I had a conversation with a friend whose daughter just got married, her eldest daughter. And the second daughter is out of the house, and the young son is almost moving out of the house. And she is really being faced with living alone or living without all the kids and all the busyness. And I said, so what are you going to do? And she said, I don't know. She goes, I guess I'll just start cleaning out closets. I said, that would be a good thing. But, this is like a major transition. It's not just one child. It's all three. And so maybe you just need to do nothing. And she started tearing up, which I knew then I was on the right track. I said, how about just don't worry about cleaning out the closet this week or even next week. Well, but I need to do something. I know I'll work on this committee, I'll work on the paperwork for this committee. I was like, no, listen to me. Just be with the experience that your kids are grown.
Right.
And that they don't live with you anymore. And again, she started tearing up, and the wiggling. She was, well, then I'll paint my bedroom. No. Just sit on the couch. Can you just sit on the couch?
And face yourself?
Really, and just,
face this new situation?
Yeah, and be present with it. Have your feelings. Have a couple good cries. Yeah, it was really hard for her.
Yes.
You know, to go, okay, I'm gonna face myself. You know, man. And we all have those moments in time in our lives.
We do.
Where we turn around and we're like, wait, what just happened? And how come I didn't realize it?
Right.
So, Jim, you have a workshop that you're going to start next week called Embody Your Awakening, right?
Right. It's a teleclass, an online webinar.
Uh-huh.
And you can find out about it by going to my website, which is www.jimdreaver.com. And it's all there, checking out the schedule on the left of the menu bar.
So it's 2 days a week.
No, 2 days a month.
2 days a month for July, August, and September. And you can do any of them?
You can attend one event, 3 events.
All of them?
All of them, whatever you like. It's $15 per event. Mm-hmm. They last 90 minutes each. And it's the first and third Tuesday of the month.
Oh, okay.
Some 7 p.m. Pacific time to 8:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Okay, awesome. And it's Embody Your Awakening.
Right. We're just...
Is this a workshop that beginners can do?
Absolutely, anybody.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I don't have to be fully awake to do it.
No, exactly. Well, if you're fully awake, I've
already embodied it.
Well, no, maybe you. There's always work. We're always embodying our awakening more and more. I mean, I'm still learning lessons around embodiment.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, I'm still a beginner at embodiment. A beginner of love. I mean, I'm always being challenged to open my heart further to people, to smile more, to be more myself.
Yeah.
I was raised in New Zealand with the eldest of 3 boys. My mother I don't remember being cuddled by her. She wasn't a snuggly person. She had issues with my father. They had a difficult marriage, and so I kind of was raised kind of standoffish and somewhat serious, and so I've had to learn to loosen up, and I'm still learning that. I'm still learning to loosen up.
Oh my God. Okay, so
I'm not perfect. There's no perfection in awakening.
Okay, I'm glad to hear you say that, because when you said you woke up in 1995, I thought, well, I guess it's done then.
I saw that I wasn't any story, so I was free of suffering. So I haven't basically suffered since 1995. And that's a blessed freedom. I tell you, I've had 3 strokes 10 years ago.
Holy moly.
Over 5 months, and I was quite a devastated process. I was in the ICU for like 4 days in UCSF Hospital in San Francisco, and it took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to recover. I had to have 36 sessions of speech therapy, and my hand is still somewhat disabled, but I wasn't afraid ever. Because I was free. I'm free. But most people would be terrified of having a stroke because they don't know who they are. And if they haven't found out who they are, they're not free. And but we still have residues. Like I still have an ego. And my ego has residues of old patterns of behavior like standoffishness and
so that stuff crops up.
It crops up. It pops up from time to time. Residues, the longer we spend on this earth being awake and free, the less it happens, but it still happens. It still happens very much. I'm very human and very, very human.
So, and I appreciate you saying that the residue occurs, because I think a lot of people, when they begin some sort of a consciousness awakening process, they think that then they'll be blissed out the rest of their life, and that tain't necessarily so.
That ain't necessarily so. Yeah,
because the residual, or I call them weeds, show up.
Yeah,
and you have to go, oh yeah, that's the kind of thing I don't want in my life.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
that's right. I remember.
Yeah.
Okay, now I know what to do about it now.
Right,
okay.
exactly. You know what to do about it,
and so it becomes easier.
Right, it becomes easier. You flow with life and with whatever's happening more easily.
Yeah,
you're in harmony with it.
Oh, I want to be in harmony.
Yes,
I like that.
You flow with it. You flow with the ups and downs of life much more easily.
Awesome.
Because you're always just present here now. This is the key. You're always here now.
Here now.
The past is gone. The future is imagination. You honor the future by thinking when you need to think, but otherwise you're just here now. You're always just here now, enjoying the flow and the fullness of and the beauty that is always here now.
Jim Dreaver, I have so enjoyed having this conversation with you. Thank you so much. And it's jimdreaver.com where people can find out more about your webinar, Embody Your Awakening, and also how to get your books.
And right, and how to contact me if you want to do a private session. And it's JIMDREAVER, Dreaver.
I'm glad you spelled that. Thank you. The book is called End Your Story, Begin Your Life. I say yes to that now. And I'm going to end with, and so it is, namaste.